Welcome to our special Field Day 2022 edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. This will be our 23rd Field Day edition of North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Join us now as we come to air with all the stories for release around the earth with edition number 1217 of This Week in Amateur Radio. Amateur Radio's open house is this weekend as ARRL Field Day 2022 takes to the airwaves. More state proclamations are issued for Field Day weekend. We'll tell you about it. We will introduce you to the new ARRL treasurer in a special report. The FCC has set a comment deadline in the recent review of what are called Franken FMs. We will tell you all about it. SpaceX is claiming that interference from Dish Network's upcoming 12 gigahertz 5G system could render their satellite internet service unusable in the U.S. The Federal Aviation Administration, Verizon, and AT&T all agreed to delay the rollout of 5G service in areas surrounding airports due to interference with onboard navigation equipment on airplanes. We will have a listing of upcoming special event stations, major hamfests and conventions, and as long as you're at your Field Day location this weekend, have a look skyward at night. There is something special going on. We will tell you all about it in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Our technology reporter, Leo Laporte, W6TWT, will answer the question, what is a GPU and why do we have graphics cards to begin with? And he will also take a look at the current state of robocalls and spam. Australia's own Otto Benz shop, VK6FLAB, takes a look at how to isolate and by how much. Our own amateur radio historian, Bill Continelli, W2XOI, returns with another edition of his summer series, Amateur Radio History Headlines, looking at the highlights of amateur radio history. And our tower climbing and antenna master, Greg Stoddard, KF9MP, takes a look at the best methods for working with a ground crew and the best way to haul cargo and coax safely up the tower. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, Field Day edition, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters studio here in beautiful downtown Albany, New York, where we are having absolutely gorgeous weather for Field Day 2022, I'm George, W2XBS.
And reporting from my home studio in Cortlandville, New York, getting ready for Field Day. I can't wait. This is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from the newsroom in Half Moon, New York, I'm Terry Saunders, N1KIN.
And reporting from our Field Day location atop the Catskill Mountains in western New York State, where the RFI is rather severe today, I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our Trade New York News Bureau, where if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, it'll change. I'm Eric, KD2RJX.
And from Studio 1 of our Central Florida News Bureau, I'm Fred, November Fox 2 Fox.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where the thermometer keeps threatening to blow its top, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
And now with our lead story, here is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
Leading off our news this week, one of the most anticipated amateur radio operating events of the year in the United States, Canada, and worldwide is this weekend. ARRL Field Day kicks off at 1800 UTC on Saturday, June 25th, and concludes at 2059 UTC on Sunday, June 26th. With more details on Amateur Radio's annual open house, we go to League headquarters, where John Ross, KD8IDJ, files this special report.
Well, the 2022 ARR Field Day is this weekend, June 25th through the 26th, and Field Day, of course, is one of the most anticipated amateur radio operating events of the year in the United States, Canada, and worldwide. Last year, almost 27,000 individuals participated, logging over 1.4 million two-way radio contacts during the event. For 2022, though, there are some new rule changes in effect. Beginning this year, all stations, regardless of operating class, are limited to 100 watts PEP transmitter output. The rule waivers that were in effect for the past 2 years, following and allowing Class D home stations to contact other Class D stations for points, and then publishing of a club aggregate score, have been made permanent now. Additionally, for groups claiming media publicity bonus points, the rules now stipulate that you must obtain media coverage for your event, not just simply attempt to do so. For complete field day rules, you can see the website, www.arrl.org/fieldday. And of course, Field Day is amateur radio's open house. It's an opportunity to showcase what amateur radio is all about to the public. Some groups use Field Day as an exercise in emergency preparedness. Others treat it as a competition, and for some, it's just a social gathering. Field Day is entirely what you make of it. After the event, be sure to submit your Field Day entry to ARRL by using the web-based submission form on the ARRL website. And here's a special Field Day announcement. You can join ARRL live from W1AW for the 2022 ARR Field Day. You can see and listen to all of the fun involved with Field Day or ask questions about the event in the live chat and get them answered in real time. You can watch it at our YouTube channel starting on June 25th, 22 at 1:30 p.m.
If you're a newly licensed ham and you would like to know where a group in your area is hosting a Field Day event, visit the ARRL Field Day Station Locator webpage at www.arrl.org/field-day-locator. How will you or your club participate in ARRL Field Day? Well, you can let others know about your planned activity before, during, and after the event via social media on the ARRL's Field Day Facebook page. When sharing your activities or photos, please use the hashtag ARRLFD. Participants are also encouraged to submit their Field Day stories and photos via the ARRL Soapbox. Entries are due 30 days after the conclusion of the event at 2059 UTC on Tuesday, July 26, 2022. And for something special at Field Day, your group can join ARRL Live from W1AW for 2022 ARRL Field Day. See all the fun involved with Field Day or ask your questions about the event in the live chat and get them answered in real time. You can watch live on YouTube starting on June 25th, 2022 at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
As the activity and excitement increases in advance of Field Day 2022, more states are issuing proclamations honoring the event. Last week, governors of California, Michigan, Massachusetts, Louisiana, and Florida issued special proclamations for Amateur Radio Week and Field Day weekend. Just this week, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine issued a proclamation recognizing June 25th and 26th as Amateur Radio Operators Appreciation Days. In South Carolina, not only did Governor Henry McMaster issue a proclamation, but the General Assembly also issued a resolution proclaiming, quote, "The members of the South Carolina General Assembly, by this resolution, proclaim June 21st to the 26th, 2022, as Amateur Radio Week, and June 25th and 26th, 2022, as American Radio Relay League Amateur Radio Field Day throughout the state, and encourage all South Carolinians to recognize the many contributions of amateur radio operators, including emergency communications and other public service work, for the continued safety of the residents of the Palmetto State," unquote. Field Day is a great event to help amateur radio operators develop their skills, and it also increases public awareness of amateur radio's role in helping during emergency situations. Every state section works hard to publicize Field Day and obtain government proclamations. The ARRL thanked the following amateurs for their efforts toward securing these proclamations. In Florida, Scott Roberts, KK4ECR, and Ark Thames, W4CPD. In South Carolina, Gordon Mooneyhan, W4EGM, and James F. Jim Boehner, N2ZZ. In Michigan, Ralph Katz, AA8RK. In Ohio, Thomas Sly, WB8LCD. In Louisiana, John M. Robertson, K5JMR. In Massachusetts, Hank McCarl, W4RIG. And in California, Robert Hansen, W6RH, Jeffrey Reinhardt, AA6JR, and Santa Barbara Section Manager John Kitchens, NS6X.
At 0500 UTC, that's 1 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, on Thursday, June 16th, the Reverse Beacon Network launched their updated website at www.reversebeacon.net. For more details on the new website and an explanation of the Reverse Beacon Network, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, who files this report from League headquarters.
Intent of the revised website was to replace the original and beta websites and to include a secure sockets layer, SSL, to enhance security for users of the site. The RBN is a network of stations that listen to the bands and report what stations they hear, including when and how well. The website's database of past spots allows operators to instantly find what stations from any given country or zone have been heard and at what times and on what frequencies. Operators can also see when they have been spotted, who spotted them, and how loud that contact was. There is an option to compare your signal with those of friends and competitors in near real time, or you can look at historical data at previous transmissions. If you wonder how your signal compared to others during a previous contest, the website's signal comparison tool will provide real quantitative data. For a instant report there, or you can query stations that you want to compare based on signals heard by a given reverse beacon on a certain band at a certain time. In 2009, Pete Smith, N4ZR, and Felipe Saliga, CT7ANO, worked to get the first version of the RBN online. The work of Mark Glenn, K7MJG, on the website, and Dave Pasco, KM3T, on connecting the servers, contributed to the RBN as a resource for listening and tracking signals. You can look at them on their website at www.reversebeacon.net.
A guide to the website's new features is available on the beta site, as well as on the new site under the About tab.
ARRL's new treasurer, John R. Sager, WJ7S, officially took office on May 1st of 2022, and he's already helping to plan the ARRL's financial future. With a close-up look at the league's new treasurer, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ, who files this report from league headquarters.
He brings with him over 40 years of financial management experience. He's a chartered financial analyst, a certified cash manager, and holds Bachelor of Arts and Master of Business Administration degrees from the University of Utah. And he's also a licensed extra-class amateur radio operator. So what led him to the ARRL? Well, he told us the ARRL is the best organization out there to advocate for ham radio interest and the best we have to ensure the hobby has a future. He also supports all of what ARRL does, such as advocacy to protect antenna rights and everything they do to keep this privilege. He also said that with the additions of CEO David Minster, NA2AA, and President Rick Roderick, K5UR, ARRL has turned a corner, and he wanted to be part of that effort. He said he has two big passions in life, amateur radio and the financial markets. He said retiring after 40 years, he thought it was a perfect opportunity to give back to the hobby and continue two interests that are close to him. Sager earned his technician and general class licenses in 2010 and 2011, his amateur extra class license in 2011. Today, CW is his favorite mode. Welcome, John Sager, WJ7S, the new ARRL treasurer.
Sager got his start in amateur radio as a shortwave listener. His family moved to Holland when he was 10 years old, where he found an old Zenith transoceanic radio. With a little rehab, including soldering and tube replacement, he was able to listen to stations from all over the world, including the many pirate stations of the day. He learned Morse code and was able to listen to the magic mode, CW, which piqued his interest in amateur radio. After returning to the States, he enjoyed visiting the ham shack of a friend's father and experienced many different modes of communication. One of his first priorities as treasurer, working with a new investment management committee, I believe in overseeing and monitoring the best investments over a long period of time to ensure ARRL survives and has the resources to pursue different ventures that come along in the future, he said. Sager hopes a solid investment program will result in a more effective strategy of attracting donors, ensuring ARRL has a legacy going into the future. Sager hopes that all the work will pay off great dividends that can help every amateur radio operator. Like many other retired professionals, Sager believes the hobby of amateur radio opens many other doors and opportunities.
According to Inside Radio Magazine, broadcasters will have until July 18th to chime in on what they believe the future of the low-power television stations operating at 87.7 FM as radio stations should be. The so-called Franken FM stations are a holdover from LPTV's analog days, and, thanks to new technology, the Federal Communications Commission has the option of deciding whether the now digital low-power TV stations should also be permitted to broadcast a secondary signal that will keep them on FM radio dials. The proposal, full of questions, was adopted unanimously by the Commission last month. The document has now appeared in the Federal Registry, triggering the due dates for comments. After the first round of feedback is due July 18th, the FCC says reply comments will be due by August 1st. The list of questions in the proposed rulemaking in MB docket number 03-185 includes whether so-called FM6 stations should enjoy a grandfathered status, or whether they should be beginning of something larger, with the FCC allowing other LPTVs to do the same. There is also a larger question of whether the spectrum cleared out by analog channel 6 stations opens an opportunity to expand the radio dial and bring with it more opportunities for diversity in ownership and programming. It also questions whether the new station should be limited to non-commercial operators. It is also asked whether it is worth it, since most radio receivers don't cover 82.1 to 87.7 megahertz. The FCC is also looking at whether to eliminate the Channel 6 distance separation rules for non-commercial FMs that operate at the end of the dial, as well as LPFMs and FM translators operating between 87.9 and 91.9 FM. The Commission earlier tentatively concluded that such a change is feasible once the digital TV conversion was completed. The number of FM6 stations has dwindled in recent years as LPTV stations were required to transition from analog to digital signals. Before the LPTV digital transition, the FCC estimated there were nearly 30 such stations targeting radio listeners. Today it says the FCC has issued temporary authority to 13. This prospect of keeping these stations on the air brightened for low-power station operators last year when LPTV owner Venture Technologies Group developed new technology that allows it to provide at least one stream of digital television programming on channel in addition to the audio programming. It says the ancillary audio signal occupies a portion of the remaining bandwidth assigned to the stations as part of their DTV channels, and it does not mean a subpar viewing experience for TV viewers.
The Icelandic National Amateur Radio Society, IRA, reports on the renewal of special authorization for amateurs to use 50 MHz. Licensees in Iceland who are interested in using increased power this summer in the 50 MHz frequency range, that's a wavelength of 6 meters, should send a request to that effect to the Icelandic regulator, FST, before transmissions begin. If permission was obtained last year, 2021, it is not valid this year, so licensees must apply afresh for an authorization from FST in the same way as, for example, if requiring to use the 70 MHz frequency band. It should also be specified that an application is being made for increased power at 50 MHz. This has come about because the IRA received a positive response from the regulator on the 13th of May to its request for renewal of increased power licenses on the 6-meter band, and the agency granted Icelandic licensees increased power licenses in the 50 to 50.5 MHz frequency range from the 1st of June this year for 4 months or until September the 31st. Full licensees are allowed to use up to 1 kilowatt and novice licensees up to 100 watts. IRA is very pleased to note that the validity of the authorization is for longer this year than last year. There's more from the board of IRA at tinyurl.com/IARU-Iceland.
Elon Musk's Starlink satellite internet company is on a collision course with 5G. In a spicy new analysis released this week, SpaceX, which owns and operates the Starlink satellite network, argues that television provider Dish's attempts to open up the 12 gigahertz spectrum for both satellite use and Dish's 5G mobile network would lead to interference that would, in effect, render Starlink's product unusable. SpaceX's Starlink satellites currently rely on the coveted 12 gigahertz band to provide downlink services in the U.S. In its analysis, SpaceX claims some amount of harmful interference from terrestrial mobile service within the 12.2 to 12.7 gigahertz spectrum band would occur about 77% of the time. The company claims that interference could result in full Starlink outages 74% of the time. From SpaceX's perspective, Dish's lobbying efforts potentially pose an existential risk to Starlink's business in certain markets. Dish, on the other hand, has previously said opening up 12 gigahertz to 5G represents a win-win for all involved. We want coexistence, Dish Executive Vice President of External and Legislative Affairs, Jeff Blum, told Fierce Wireless last year. We believe coexistence is possible. We want to protect our own satellite service. For those who've lost track, SpaceX has launched about 2,700 Starlink satellites into Earth's low Earth orbit and has over 400,000 subscribers worldwide, first launching its internet service in October 2020. SpaceX CEO Elon Musk has said he hopes to boost the number of satellites in space up to 42,000 over the next few decades, with the ultimate goal of helping bring online roughly one-third of the world population that still lacks internet access. For now, though, SpaceX is mostly bringing frustratingly unreliable internet to rural Americans. Musk's company says that Dish's efforts to incorporate 5G in the 12 gigahertz band could muck those plans up. Dish said that the company's expert engineers are currently evaluating SpaceX's claims. The Federal Communications Commission, which governs wireless spectrum use, did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Starlink's only had satellites floating in space for around 3 years, but it's already grown a reputation for starting skirmishes with ISPs. Last year, a collection of rural broadband providers united under the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association questioned whether or not Starlink qualified to receive federal funds from the FCC. Those firms doubted whether or not SpaceX could actually meet the speeds and performance it advertised. On the issue of potential 5G interference, it's difficult to tell from the outside whether SpaceX or Dish's analyses are closer to reality.
Concerns about radio interference have prompted 2 U.S. wireless carriers to delay part of the rollout of their 5G service. Despite findings from the Federal Communications Commission that 5G wireless service poses no risks to aircraft sharing different parts of the same C-band, 2 major U.S. cellular carriers have announced they'll be delaying their 5G rollout near airports with regional carriers. According to the trade magazine Aviation Today, the Federal Aviation Administration announced on June 17th that Verizon and AT&T have agreed to postpone parts of the rollout to enable airlines to assess whether their altimeters were free from interference and undertake any necessary upgrades. Aviation experts have said that some altimeters, particularly those used by regional aircraft, could be vulnerable to interference without a retrofit of RF filters on existing altimeters or installation of newer ones. The agreement delays the completion of the rollout until July of 2023. An article in Aviation Today said that the number of altimeter manufacturers are presently working on the development and testing of filters and installation kits. The trade group Airlines for America criticized the agreement for setting what is called an arbitrary deadline and expressed concern over what might happen if the altimeter modifications were not available by July of next year. The chief executive officer for the trade group, Nicholas Kallio, told the FAA's acting administrator, Billy Nolan, that he considered the agreement of a rushed approach to avionics modifications amid pressure from the telecommunications companies.
What is a GPU and how does it work? Next.
And now with the latest technology news and commentary from Petaluma, California. This Week in Amateur Radio is proud to present Leo Laporte.
And it really takes a little bit of history to explain why we even have graphics cards. In the early days of computers, remember, it was a green screen with text on a black background or maybe a amber text on a black background. The graphics could be stored in a small amount of memory, and each part of the memory, each cell of the memory just had that area of the screen, which really was the size of a character. So you'd stick a T in that cell, and a T would show up on the screen. That was called a frame buffer. And in those days, that's all you needed. Although there was some pretty clever engineering. If you ever want to find some fun stuff to talk about, study up on how Woz built the frame buffer on the original Apple I. It was sheer genius. He had to do it with as few chips as possible to keep costs down, and he did some amazing things. Nowadays, we've come a little bit farther. Obviously, we're not just putting characters on a green screen. We're putting beautiful, vivid, realistic graphics. And that's why we now have something called graphics cards or graphics processors on our computer. These are chips that are dedicated to drawing graphics up on the screen. They'll also have a dedicated area of memory, much like that original frame buffer, but a lot bigger, and with the capability of displaying not just characters, but dots of color and more. So all computers have to do this. Now that we have graphic user interfaces, not text-based interfaces, as soon as we went to GUIs, a computer had to have a way of drawing onto the screen, drawing those graphics onto the screen. And even today, most computers, that's built into the chip set that the computer is using. It's part of the processor. On your phone, it's a special dedicated area of the processor. Even on motherboards of many computers, it's built into the system on a chip that's in that computer. We call that sometimes motherboard graphics or built-in graphics. But if you want to play more graphically intensive games, if you want more sophisticated on-screen graphics, you'll move to what we call discrete graphics, or a dedicated graphics processing unit, a GPU as compared to the CPU, which is the brains of your computer. They work together. The CPU will calculate what should be on the screen, send that information to the GPU, which then has the responsibility of rendering it. GPUs have special chips built into them that are designed specifically for displaying graphics. Things like the capability of moving big chunks of memory in one instruction, and short instructions around on the screen. Special processors for doing the math that needs to be done to calculate edges so that they can be smooth instead of staggered. Most graphics processors units think in geometric terms called voxels, or little triangles instead of dots, and they map those triangles onto objects, do a lot of sophisticated calculations. So really a graphics processor on a computer has two main functions. It has special chips designed for doing the high-end mathematics required to render the graphics, and then extra memory used for storing those graphics before they're blasted onto the screen. So typically what happens is you have a frame buffer that is built by the graphics processor, and then a command puts it on the screen. That's what you see while another frame is generated, and then blasted on the screen, another frame is generated. And that happens 60, 120 times, sometimes even more often per second, to give you fluid animation. It's really an amazing thing. Our graphics processors are so good at math that they're often used for other math-intensive things like artificial intelligence. NVIDIA, which is one of the big manufacturers of graphics or designers of graphics chips, has a whole auto division where they do smart cars, they do intelligent auto assist for driving, and all of that's using the same kind of processors, but the math is different but sort of similar. So this intense capability, this mathematical capability, can be used in a lot of other ways. Machine learning, artificial intelligence. GPUs are often used by computers when you are editing video and there's a lot of processing that needs to be done to the video. The GPU is a much more efficient way of doing mass operations on large areas of memory, things like that. You always will have, on any graphics operating system you use today, you will have a dedicated part of that system that just does graphics. It may not be a separate chip, it may not be separate memory, but you'll always have that. On a higher end system where you want better performance, you'll even have a dedicated card or a dedicated area, dedicated chips, dedicated memory just for the graphics processing unit. Nowadays, everybody's got a GPU. It's just how powerful your GPU is. I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to keep it at a basic level. It's designed to do all that fancy mathematics that are involved with putting graphics up on the screen. That's basically what a GPU does. Let's see, what else can we talk about? I'm curious if you've noticed any improvement in spam calls, robocalls, all of that. Supposedly it's been taken care of, and I think it kind of has. Now, get ready, because the silly season is upon us. You may remember a couple of years ago and 4 years ago and 6 years ago when, all the campaigns spun up and you would get calls every day from the political campaigns and so forth. My guess is, at least it's been my experience, I'm curious if it's yours, they're not calling as much as they are texting. Now I get texts like crazy, tons of texts, all the time. Many of them panicky. We need money. We're running out of money. Got to send us money. A lot of that. You can only laugh. There's no, as far as I know, way to block text. I guess you could say stop. The FCC has implemented this technology called Stir and Shaken, which sounds like a James Bond recipe for a martini, but is in fact what they call a caller ID authentication protocol. And they have till June 30th of next year to implement it. But I think some of the carriers are already starting to implement it. The idea is when a call is made, it's stirred. That is, the originating network attaches authentication information to it. And then when received by the receiving network, could be the same network, could be a different one, it's shaken, which means they verify its origination. See, if you're going to do spam robocalls or spam calls of any kind, you don't really, it's the same with spam email, you don't really want anybody to know the real origination, because then they could block you. Notice how spammers change their phone number all the time. They usually, these days, try to use your area code, sometimes even your local exchange. So the first digit, 6 digits, are the ones you recognize, which is, I think, designed to make you think maybe it's your kid calling or the kid's school calling or your doctor or somebody you know. You just don't know that number. So they're hoping you'll pick up, and then it goes, you've just won a trip to nowhere. Where are they going? Maybe that's what's killing them. There's also, most of the carriers now are implementing spam blocking technology. I know T-Mobile just turned theirs on. And I've been using for some time. Apple has a feature, which I like on the iPhone. I think that you can do this on Android too. I seem to remember. Where you say, if that phone call is not coming from a number I know, it's not from my phone book, just send it to voicemail. And if it's important, they'll leave a message, and then you can add them to your phone book if you want to hear from them from now on. I like that feature. So my phone hardly rings anymore. But then I'm not a big phone caller either. I prefer other means of communication, mostly none. Don't bother me and I won't bother you. How about that? What's that? Is that a deal? Okay. I call my mom once a week. She's hard to get a hold of now. I say, Mom, you want to FaceTime? Because we usually FaceTime. That's the other thing. I don't use the phone as much as I'll use FaceTime, or on the Google side, Duo, or of course we're all using Zoom and Meet and Teams and all the different video calling things. That's not really a phone call. That's that's like a data connection. I feel like it's close to a phone call. It's a phone call plus, phone call with pictures. I feel like the call screening has gotten good now. Remember spam email was such a problem? It's not gone away. Still, the vast majority of internet email traffic is spam, is junk mail. But the systems to block it have gotten so good now that you just rarely see it anymore, right? Most of the spam I see is stuff I signed up for, or newsletters I signed up for. Or maybe when I signed up for something and I gave my address and they said, you want to get stuff from us? And I forgot to say no. And it's mostly that. We call it bacon. It's spam you asked for is bacon. If you get spam you didn't ask for, that's spam. Definitely spam. Not related to Hormel's pork shoulder product. That Hormel people would like me to mention that. They actually allow us to use the term spam. At first they were like, that's our brand name for a product. Can you not call junk mail spam? For a while, we called it uses. That's a terrible name. UCE, unsolicited commercial email. Oos. I got some oos today. Yeah, spam. It just works. Hormel finally gave up. He said, all right, fine. Call it spam, but just don't confuse it with our fine pork shoulder product. So I won't. It's delicious. It's not like junk email at all, not in any respect. So it's gotten better, hasn't it? The junk calls. Now I just get a lot of junk texts. They haven't got a solution for that yet. You know where spam came from, right? Monty Python. If you ever want to go, you can go. If you want some fun, go to YouTube. If you haven't seen it, in the spam skit where they're coming to breakfast and everything's got spam in it. A lot of spam. Spam just takes over the whole skit. Pretty soon the singers come on and sing spammity spam, wonderful spam. That's the Hormel pork shoulder product they're talking about there. But somebody said, it's just like the junk email that it multiplies. So they call it spam, and a term was born. Anyway, I'm glad you were here, and I'm here, and I'll be here next week, and I hope you'll come by and bring your friends too as we talk high tech. Leo Laporte, the tech guy.
Are you ready for another trip into amateur radio history? I'm Bill Continelli, W2XOY, and I'll be back in a moment with another edition of the Ancient Amateur Archives, here on This Week in Amateur Radio. This is Bill Continelli, W2XOY, with Amateur Radio History Headlines. 1921. The National Amateur Wireless Association becomes active. Its main success is the broadcast of the Dempsey-Carpenter fight. Many amateurs helped in this broadcast, from acting as relay stations to setting up receivers and loudspeakers in public places. 1921 through 1922. The transatlantic tests are a success. Amateurs discover that frequencies below 200 meters, or above 1500 kilocycles, work even better. Amateur broadcasting, or citizen radio, is popular with up to 1,200 amateurs, but is prohibited in 1922 with the first broadcast licenses issued. 1923. The amateur census is at 14,000. Shortwave development continues. The Macmillan Arctic Expedition is the first to carry two-way radio, an amateur 200-meter station. Over the next years, dozens of Arctic and Antarctic expeditions, including those of Commander Byrd, used amateur radio as their primary communications. 1924. Amateurs get new bands at 80, 40, 20, and 5 meters. Spark is prohibited on the new bands. The broadcast band is expanded. The ARRL adopted Esperanto as the international auxiliary language. I bet you didn't know that. This has been Amateur Radio History Headlines with Bill Continelli, W2XOY, for This Week in Amateur Radio.
This week's AMSAT news from Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here. And, of course, with the Field Day coming up this weekend, he knows that everyone is busy. However, he wants you to mark your calendars now for the 40th Annual AMSAT Space Symposium and General Meeting. That will be held October 21st and 22nd in Bloomington, Minnesota. On the agenda there, satellite presentations, operating techniques, news, and plans for the amateur satellite world. Board of Directors meeting for October 20th. Opportunities to meet the board and members and officers. AMSAT General Membership Meeting. There will be an auction, an annual banquet, a keynote speaker, and door prizes. Additional information about the symposium and about AMSAT is also available at amsat.org.
It's time for the weekly propagation forecast report, brought to us each week by Tad Cook, K7RA, in Seattle, Washington. Tad says this week that the past reporting week, which was June 16th through the 22nd, began with a bang when the daily sunspot number was 159, but sunspot numbers declined every day to finally reach 80 on June 22nd. Our new sunspot group emerged on June 15th, another emerged on June 16th, one more on June 18th, and even another on June 21st. The average daily sunspot number over the week was 124.6, up substantially from 74.3 the previous 7 days. The average daily solar flux also rose from 123.9 to 140.5. The average daily planetary A index rose from 9.7 to 11.4, and the middle latitude numbers increased 1 point to 11.9. It was really great to see the sun covered with spots on spaceweather.com. Use the archives feature toward the upper right, and you can see the daily solar images on the left of the page for any date in the past. Tad particularly appreciated the image of June 17th, our sun blanketed with sunspots. Unfortunately, a California wildfire cut power to the Solar Dynamics Observatory Data Center at Stanford University, so solar images are not being provided according to spaceweather.com. So let's take a look at the latest forecast from the United States Air Force, and they show solar flux at 1:20 and 1:15 on June 24th and 25th, 1:10 on June 26th and 27th, 100 on June 28th and 29th, 105 on June 30th, 100 on July 1st through the 2nd, then 105, 110, 115, 120, and 125 on July 3rd through the 7th, and 130 on July 8th and 9th. A quick look at the planetary A-index prediction now, and that will be 8, 12, and 15 on June 24th through the 26th, 5 on June 27th to July 7th, and then 8, 8, 12, and 8 on July 8th through the 11th.
To celebrate the first three stages of the 2022 Tour de France bicycle race in Denmark, there will be a special event station on the air from July 1st through the 3rd. OZ22TDF will operate from 0800 to 1600 UTC using the 10, 12, 15, 17, 20, 30, 40, and 80 meter bands, CW, FT8, and SSB. D-Star will also be available. That will be at DCS 994F. All contacts will be logged, and EQSL will be used. And the Alexander Association in Sweden will celebrate Alexanderson Day on July 3rd, 2022. Grimmington, Sweden is the site of the World Heritage Grimmington radio station, which includes a 98-year-old 200 kW and an Alexanderson alternator. Amateur radio station KSK6 SAQ will be in operation on the following frequencies: 3.535 kilohertz CW there, 7.035 kilohertz CW, 14.035 kilohertz CW, and some single sideband frequencies, 3.775 and 7.140. QSL reports can be sent to SK6SAQ at info@alexander.n.se. In radio sport contesting, some important contests, of course, June 25th through the 26th, ARR Field Day. We have it all, CW, phone, and digital. On June 25th, the Paja Iran Borgo DX contest, that is phone. June 25th, also the UFT QRP contest, CW there. On June 25th and June 26th, the Ukrainian DX Digi contest, RTTY. On June 25th and 26th, His Majesty King of Spain contest, SSB and phone. On June 27th, the OK1WC Memorial, CW there. And on June 27th, the RSGP FT4 contest, of course, FT4. And if you need to look for more contests, you can visit the ARRL contest calendar on our website for more events and information. And here are some upcoming section, state, and division conventions now through June 26th, going on right now, as a matter of fact. The Ham Radio International Amateur Radio Exhibition in Friedrichshafen, Germany. On July 2nd, the Firecracker Ham Fest, hosting the ARRL Pennsylvania State Convention. That's in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And July 15th through the 17th, the Glacier Wharton Ham Fest, hosting the ARRL Montana Convention. That is in Essex, Montana.
Sweden's National Amateur Radio Society, SSA, reports that a radio amateur has been appointed Archbishop of the Church of Sweden. Last week, the Church of Sweden elected Martin Modéus as the new Archbishop. Martin, who today is the Bishop of the Diocese of Linköping, has the call sign SM5LVQ, will be the 71st Archbishop of the Church of Sweden. According to the Swedish Society of Radio Amateurs, Martin already serves the Church as Bishop of the Diocese of Linköping, the fifth largest city in Sweden, located in the south of the country. Martin will be received as Archbishop during a service to be held in December at Uppsala Cathedral, which has been the see of the Church of Sweden's Archbishop since the 12th century. Martin is to succeed Ante Jacqueline, Sweden's first female Archbishop, who is retiring.
Dr. Nathaniel A. Frizzell, Ph.D., Whiskey 2 November Alpha Foxtrot, recently published a research article titled First Observations of Large-Scale Traveling Ionospheric Disturbances Using Automated Amateur Radio Receiving Networks. Dr. Frizzell is an assistant professor at the University of Scranton's Physics and Electrical Engineering Department. Supported by a team of researchers from NASA and the Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation, or HAM-SCI, he was able to observe large waves for the first time. Volunteers from the amateur radio community collected the data. The waves are larger than the state of Texas and travel through the Earth's atmosphere faster than jet-powered aircraft. They affect all forms of communication, including amateur radio. You can read the original research paper at the NASA Citizen Science Highlight website.
In a recent Freedom of Information request, Ofcom were asked to provide details of pirate broadcast radio stations outside London for the years 2021 to 2022. Ofcom refused to give names of the stations as they considered that the disclosure of this information would be likely to prejudice crime prevention or detection, and further that releasing this information would likely aid currently operating pirate stations and advertise their operation. But Ofcom did provide some statistics concerning action they had taken concerning 14 pirate radio stations and the number of complaints they had received. For links to the information, look up this story at southgatearc.org. And you can submit your own Freedom of Information request to Ofcom online at www.whatdotheknow.com/new/Ofcom. And talking of ex-pirate radio stations, Ray Clark is giving a talk on the history of Radio Caroline at the Southwold Arts Festival on June the 28th. Ray joined Radio Caroline in the 1980s and wrote the book on which the film The Boat That Rocked was based. He will tell the amazing history of the world's most famous pirate radio station. And you can book to attend the talk by going to www.southwoldartsfestival.co.uk and navigate to the Festival Events section.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. If you connect the antenna ports of two radios together and transmit from one into the other, that would be bad, right? Just how bad would it be? And what could you do differently? Before I dig in, you might ask yourself why on earth this question even arises. Consider having two radios and one antenna. You couldn't use a T-piece to connect two radios to the antenna unless both were receivers. So, after connecting and disconnecting coax for a decade, you might decide to use a two-position coaxial switch instead. Set the switch to one port and the first radio is connected to the antenna. Flick it to the other port and you've just avoided swapping coax between radios. I'll point out that in most cases a coaxial switch can be used to connect multiple antennas to one radio, or, in reverse, connect multiple radios to one antenna. When you do start looking for a switch, it would be good to test that at no point it connected any two switching ports together, potentially causing the magic smoke to escape from your radio. A less obvious issue is that a coaxial switch has a property called isolation. It's a measure of what part of a signal leaks between ports, and you'll see the isolation or crosstalk of a switch described in decibels or dB. If you recall, a dB is a relative measure. It means that it's something in comparison with something else. In our case, the amount of signal going into one port compared with the amount of signal leaking through to a disconnected port. You'd think that in a perfect switch none of the signal would leak through, but it turns out that under different frequencies a switch responds differently, even one specifically designed for switching radio frequencies. It might be that a 1 kHz signal is completely isolated, but a 1 GHz signal is not. Which is why when you look at the specifications of a coax switch, you'll see something like greater than 70 dB isolation at 200 MHz. It's worth noting that the lower the frequency, the higher the isolation, indicating that in the worst case, at 200 MHz, there's 70 dB isolation. But at lower frequencies it has higher isolation, sometimes much higher. If you were to transmit into this switch with 5 watts at 200 MHz, the amount of signal that can leak through would be 70 dB less than 5 watts. You might recall that you can convert watts to dBm to allow you to do some interesting calculations. As with other dB scales, it's in comparison to something else. In this case, a dBm is in reference to 1 milliwatt, and 5 watts is the equivalent of 37 dBm. This means that if you had a switch with 70 dB isolation, you'd start with a 37 dBm transmission, take 70 dB isolation, and end up with a minus 33 dBm signal leaking through. That's the same as 0.0005 milliwatts. In other words, your 5-watt transmission leaks through your coax switch to the tune of 0.0005 milliwatts. Is that enough to damage your radio? Well, that depends on the radio, but let's put some numbers against it. S9 on VHF and UHF was defined in 1981 as minus 93 dBm, assuming a 50 ohm impedance of your radio. So, our leaking signal, minus 33 dBm, is 60 dB higher than S9. You'd report it as a 60/9 contact. A tad excessive, but not unheard of, so by that metric you should be fine. Many, but not all radios specify the maximum radio frequency, or RF power, that they can handle. For example, according to the documentation, both the Nano VNA and an ICOM IC706 can each handle a 20 dBm or 200 milliwatt signal without doing damage. That means that your minus 33 dBm signal shouldn't do any damage to those two devices. I'm off to see what the isolation is for cheap 12-volt relays to see if I can construct a cost-effective modular remote control antenna switch with lightning detection. What are you building next? I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima, Alpha Bravo.
The California-based Amateur Radio Digital Communications, or ARDC Foundation, has issued 2 grants aimed at helping elementary schoolers and college students learn and experiment with amateur radio. The first grant going to science is Elementary, a 501c3 nonprofit organization, will allow for the printing of Jasmine and Jose Build a Radio, the next volume in the Sciences Elementary series of books, which helps students solve problems using science. The grant also includes 2,240 kits for students, an on-site field trip for 4th graders, and all materials to help with the experiments. It is targeted for 7-year-old students and their families, including those with limited incomes, so that everyone can participate. The Jasmine and Jose story will find the pair visiting a friend who is an amateur radio operator. Intrigued with what they see and hear, they set out to build a radio of their own. The grant will include publication of companion readers for adults and will cover the costs of school-based activities in which the kids build radios of their own. The books and kits will be provided free to youngsters attending school in low-income communities in the San Francisco Bay Area. If you don't live in the region, you can still participate, as everyone else will be able to download the book and the adult reading companion for free as PDFs. The field trips will allow students to work in teams using simple components to build a working radio. The ARDC says these lessons track the next generation of science standards, setting expectations of what students should know and be able to accomplish. The second ARDC grant is to Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois. It will allow 3 recent graduates to complete their work, which will allow amateur radio operators to experiment in the 33-centimeter band. The project is known as the DAM Mod 915 and is being developed by Peter Handler, W9PLH, Connor Dickey, KD9LSV, and Philip Pierce, AC9YC. Their work using digital protocols will allow amateur radio operators, developers, or other educational institutions to experiment and build hardware or software for their own unique applications. The 33-centimeter band is a 900 megahertz section of the UHF band and is allocated on a secondary basis to amateur radio operators. Non-licensed users known as SIM, or Science Information Medical, can also use the band to develop applications and hardware for commercial uses. Once the DAM Mod 915 project is complete, all the data and software will be available at https://github.com/DAEMOD-915. For additional information about amateur radio digital communications, visit their website at ampr.org.
Members of the Independence Amateur Radio Club, N0ID, only have to wait a little bit longer for the rescheduled launch of the high-altitude balloon that they're sending skyward with a crossband repeater and an APRS on board. The Kansas Hams are especially excited because the launch, rescheduled from earlier this month, will coincide with the Great Plains Super Launch on July 16. The Super Launch is a wide-ranging event in which a number of similar balloons will be launched at sites throughout the Midwest. Stan Pearson, AE0LM, secretary of the Independence Club, said that during the club's balloon's expected 2-hour flight over southeast Kansas, it will communicate with one of these super launch balloons flying high over Wisconsin. Using a common downlink but separate uplinks, the balloons will permit radio operators in both areas to talk to one another using VHF and UHF radios. The crossband repeater has an uplink of 147.91 MHz and a downlink on 449.01 MHz. Stan said the repeaters will be configured to work bidirectionally so that anything received on the VHF frequency is repeated on the UHF frequency and vice versa. Those who cannot be on site at the Riverside Park for the launch or reside out of the area and wish to track the balloon, you can follow their journey following the 8 a.m. launch on that day at www.aprs.fi. Additional details are available at the club website at n0id.org.
Tony Echo India 5 Echo Mike reports that on Monday the 13th of June, a new Irish language weekly net was launched at 8 p.m. local time on the Echo India 2 Kilo Papa Romeo repeater located at Kipper in the Wicklow Mountains of Eire. This is one of the highest points in the country. It's hoped that this will encourage the use of the language amongst radio amateurs. The regular net will be an informal, friendly and bilingual get-together on the air. It will cater for all levels of fluency. Tony says that callers should not be shy, but join in and use the language that you have, or even just listen in. It's hoped to expand this net to 40 metres or 80 metres. Perhaps there are other Echo India stations who would like to volunteer to start similar nets in their own areas. You hear rugby referees instruct scrum halves who delay playing the ball to use it. If they don't, they lose it, as the opposition is awarded a scrum. Tony comments that similarly with the Irish language, let Echo India amateurs play their part by using the Irish language too.
CQ POTA, CQ Parks on the Air.
This is November 3, Victor Echo Mike from Parks on the Air with your month ending May 2022 Parks on the Air update. Be sure to visit parksontheair.com for information about the program and POTA.app for spotting, park information, leaderboards, and more. In Parks on the Air news, we're quickly approaching what is usually the busiest POTA weekend of the year, the annual plaque event. Last year, there were about 500 activators that put more than 700 parks on the air. We're hoping that you'll head out to a park also to see if we can hit the 1,000 park mark. Whether you activate or hunt, there are 17 plaques up for grabs to reward your efforts for categories of most contacts overall, voice contacts, CW contacts, digital contacts, Rover and Chaser, DX by IARU region, and clubs. Check out the plaque section from the menu at POTA.app for more details. If you're activating with a club, either for the summer plaque event or at any other time of year, we also recommend checking out the new POTA Guide for Clubs, available from the resources section at POTA.app. This guide is a short must-read for clubs that will help ensure a fun and successful club activation. And now for the monthly stats update. April showers may bring out May flowers, but just as importantly, they also bring out the park activators. We had over 2,000 activators out, who did nearly 11,000 activations from 4,255 parks in 30 different DX entities. The same top activators have continued their runs, with N2 NWK taking the top spot for number of activations with 253, and W6ZD grabbing the high count of parks with 123. The top hunters for the month were also repeats. K9 ICP hunted 957 parks, and AD2CD made 1,769 hunter QSOs. In POTA DX, Spain held the top spot in Region 1 with 167 activations, just ahead of England's 151. Canada and Japan continued to hold their top spots in regions 2 and 3 respectively. One of our top DX activators this month was a familiar operator to the late shift crowd, who now has a new call sign. VE3JLN, formerly N6NRD, did 87 activations while also rolling over the kilo level at 14 different parks in a single day. JF7RJM took the top spot for number of parks activated, with 40 for the month. By special request this month, we'd also like to share the activity by time of day. If you're a new activator or hunter, you're likely to have the most success between 1500 and 2100 UTC on 20 and 40 meters. And last but not least, let's check in on the progress of the Bailey Sprott Challenge. In 2021, N5HA and W9AV each managed to hunt a park every day, so in 2022, we're following along to see if anyone else can match their feat. As we approach the halfway point in the year, we have 3 activators who have activated every day of the year, along with one other who may still be in the running pending log uploads. N2NWK, KE8PZN, K4NYM, and KD4MZM. The pool of hunters is now down to 31. To all of the Bailey Sprott participants, congrats on your success so far, and we look forward to seeing how you do in the second half of the year. This concludes our May 2022 Parks on the Air update. As always, the team at Parks on the Air wishes you safe activations and happy hunting. 73.
The Dutch National Amateur Radio Society, VERON, reports that on June the 12th, radio amateurs gave information and demonstrations about Morse code as a means of communication to the public at the Open Air Museum at Arnhem. Visitor interest was great. Many said that they learned a great deal, and the number of people who wanted to take an informal Morse aptitude test were well above expectations. All in all, it was a very successful day. This activity was dominated by Morse code as an undeniable cultural heritage, a status that Morse code formally received in the Netherlands in 2014. For this occasion, the grounds of the Open Air Museum were temporarily transformed into an improvised shack and demonstration space. This was set up in advance on Saturday, June the 11th by Okko, Papa Hotel 2 Charlie Victor, Ernst, Papa Alpha 1 Echo Juliet Oscar, and Rob, Papa Alpha 5 Victor. On Sunday, June the 12th, visitors to the temporary shack heard information about amateur radio in general and Morse code in particular. Many guests had heard of Morse code, some by seeing it used in films, and older people reminisced back to times of war. Okko and Rob made Morse code contacts on the air and used the special call sign Papa Alpha 6 Oscar Lima Mike, which stands for Open Air Museum in the Dutch language. The speed with which they ticked off the contacts garnered great admiration, especially when they also gave spoken explanations whilst they were in contact, without missing any of the code. Guests could also try their own Morse skills. One of the instructors firstly told the candidate how they could convert their own nickname into Morse characters without revealing that name to the instructor. Then they had to transmit that nickname with a Morse key, and the instructor had to receive and reveal the name. Of course, the graduates received a certificate to take home. The Open Air Museum had 2,290 visitors on June the 12th, of whom the Veron Ham radio team received about 400. Many of them were so interested in Morse code that they stayed for 15 minutes or more. In addition, Henk, Papa Alpha 0 Hotel Papa Victor, awarded more than 40 Morse proficiency certificates. All this gave the team a lot of satisfaction, so this activity will be well worth repeating. You can find out more by visiting the Veron website tinyurl.com/IARU-Netherlands. The Veron website is rather clever, as it should auto-detect your favoured language and translate the site for you. Since 2011, the Bath-based distance learning team has helped over 900 students to obtain their full amateur radio licence. The next course starts in August, and you can book now to take part. Student feedback is always very positive, and the pass rate continues to be well over 80%, compared with a national average of around 66%. Having completed a second intermediate licence course in May, the team are now planning another full licence level course. The course will run from the end of August to December. Students will receive weekly work packages via an online classroom and will have access to weekly online tutorials. Each student is allocated to one of the remote tutors who provide feedback and additional guidance. There are weekly quizzes to check on progress, and at the end of the course there will be a number of mock exams. There is no charge for the training, but applicants must work through some pre-course material and complete a quiz to be eligible for a place. This focuses on the new topics that were introduced to the intermediate syllabus in 2019. The aim of the pre-course classroom is to make sure applicants can use the Bath-based distance learning systems and to ensure that they're ready for the full training. Each student will need to provide their own RSGB full license textbook and arrange their own exam at the end of the course. Advice on this will be given as part of the course. The deadline for course applications is Tuesday, the 26th of July. To request full details and an application form, please email Bath-based Distance Learning Team Leader Steve, Golf 0 Foxtrot Uniform Whiskey, via G0 Foxtrot Uniform Whiskey at tiscali.co.uk. And the website is at badarc.webs.com/Bath-training. That's badarc.webs.com/Bath-training.
And now, with his segment on tower climbing and antenna safety, here is Arizona's own Greg Stoddard, KF9MP.
Climbing with others. There are times when tower jobs we need to do require helpers assisting us on the ground and with us on the tower. These are special situations which require higher than normal levels of communication between team members. When hauling coax, antennas, sidearms, or other hardware up the tower, never hoist hardware up the tower with someone underneath the cargo, unless they're wearing the proper safety gear and have been trained in tower work. Let's face it, on a tower, you don't get a second chance. There are at least 3 sides to each tower. So keep the lower climber on a different side, and besides, a freestanding tower is happier when you spread the load more evenly. So before you start to do tower work with other climbers and ground crew, stop, take a moment, and discuss with everyone exactly what you intend to do, the goals to accomplish, the order the tasks will be done in, special hardware you may need, and a discussion about hoisting things up and down the tower. The guy on the ground should always have the job of keeping sidewalk supervisors away from the base area of the tower. Even a 1/4-20 zinc-plated nut falling 80 feet onto the top of an unprotected skull can leave a permanent dent, not to mention a thud that will be ringing for hours in the victim's head. There's a good argument here for wearing a hard hat. Few hams I know of own one or even know where to buy one, so the next best thing is only one person climbing at a time. If climbing with a person already strapped on working above you, choose a different side to climb on. If you're already on the tower, but the antenna you need to work on is like 6 feet out on a sidearm, a different set of rules apply. It is most likely that the sidearm is fully capable of holding your weight as is. My personal rule is to never totally trust any part of the tower. This includes sidearms. So I bring along my trusty 15-foot strap. This yellow strap is very lightweight but fully capable of pulling a snowbound car out of a ditch. I attach one end of this strap to my harness and the other to a tower leg about 5 feet or more above the point where the sidearm mounts. This strap is strong enough to catch the full weight of the sidearm, myself, and my cargo. If you're expecting to work on a sidearm, I strongly recommend you invest in one of these rescue type straps. Copy down my URL at the end of this segment if you don't know where to start looking for this type of information. Not only did I want this series to offer safety tips, I also wanted to offer hints to make the job go faster and easier. The way I figure, an easier climb is bound to be a safer climb. So let's cover a couple of quick hints. For your tower work, attach them to a short piece of fishing line. Use the woven multi-filament type. Make it long enough to tie a wrist strap in the other end. And tie the other end to the tool you don't wish to drop. If you have a friend with a leather working hobby, a good Christmas present would be a whole bunch of these straps. You can keep your tools securely on your arm and in your hand with one of these straps. Remember to order them large enough to fit around your arm when you're wearing cold weather climbing gear. Another one of my favorites is my coaxial cable hanger. I bent the hook in a piece of reinforcing steel bar, the type used in concrete work and often sold at hardware stores. I bent a squared hook in one end, about 3 inches over and 5 inches back down, sort of like a giant fishing hook. I use electrical tape to hold the coax onto the rod that I'm bringing up the tower as I climb. I secure about 2 feet of the coax to the rod. As I climb, I reach down, grab the hook and lift it to a tower rung up as high as I can reach. Don't forget a short piece of rope to secure the coax hook to a loop on your climbing belt just in case you might drop it. Some people like to lift coax after they get to the antenna that it connects to. I've had problems with coax damage doing it this way, so this has worked fine for me. I stretch out the coax on the ground and the crew helps feed it up to me as I climb further. This would probably not work on very long lengths and may be unnecessary on shorter towers. Remember, any time you spend learning about tower safety is an investment in yourself. Education is a big part of tower safety. This is Greg Stoddard, KF9MP, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
Operating tips and the wisdom of experience aren't the only things being dispensed at the contest forum during ham radio in Friedrichshafen, Germany, which started on the 24th. Organizers of 2018's World Radio Transport Team Championship will be at the forum on June 25th to present funds and important equipment for use during the World Championship to take place in July of 2023 in Bologna, Italy. The gift will include 70 kits of emergency and monitoring equipment that have been used during WRTC 2018 in Germany. Each kit has a DCF-77 radio controller clock, power sensor for 2 radios, an SCC score collecting computer, and a Nokia cell phone. The donation from the 2018 event will be presented by WRTC 2018 President Chris DL1 MGB. Writing on the WRTC 2022 Reflector Committee member Claudio Veroli, I4VEQ, thanked the benefactors from the German event, calling the donation a huge help to the organization of WRTC 2022.
The dog days of August will soon be upon us, and so too will August 26th, known as International Dog Day. A number of hams around the world have decided to run with the pack by getting special event call signs and getting on the air to publicize the needs of abandoned and abused pets who have ended up in shelters, dogs as well as cats. Hans, YL3JD, wrote in a QRZ.com forum that he will be operating CW from his shack in Latvia using the call sign Yankee Lima 1 DOG, starting on Monday, the 22nd of August until the 26th. Hans says he feels obligated to give exposure to this. In my power as radio amateur and animal lover, bringing attention to these abandoned pets is the least I can do. There are plans for other call signs to be on the air too, including Jupe, PG41, signing as PF6DOG, and Edwin, PD0SOT, signing as PD6DOG. International Cat Day will be celebrated on August 8th. Yavenji, YL2TD, will be among those on the air on the 7th until the 9th of August. He'll be using the call YL1CAT. The list is growing, but organizers are looking for even more operators to call QRZ on behalf of animal shelters. Visit the website catsanddogsontheair.com to get details. Then email Hugo, CT7 Alpha Oscar Victor, to have your station included on the list.
ANACOM, Portugal's communications regulator, carried out during May 2022, together with the National Maritime Authority and, in some cases, the Authority for Working Conditions, various inspection actions on vessels. In total, ANACOM supervised 26 vessels, including fishing grounds and tourist vessels. On the 26th and 27th of May, the actions involved the 3 authorities and took place in the fishing ports of Nazare and Peniche, and the legality of the means of communication installed on board 6 coastal fishing vessels, 2 in Nazare and 4 in Peniche, was verified. The radio stations were installed and operating in accordance with the legislation in force. Between the 17th and 20th of May, ANACOM carried out an action with the Maritime Police and the Autonomous Region of Madeira, and a total of 14 vessels were inspected, including fishing vessels and maritime tourist vessels. 9 of the 14 vessels were first inspected. All vessels surveyed presented radio stations accordingly. On May 10th, an ANACOM inspection action was carried out with the Maritime Police in the port of Lexios to 6 fishing vessels. In this case, an illicit transceiver of the Land Mobile Service was seized. These actions aimed to verify the status, operability, and correct use of radio communications equipment installed on board vessels. If they are not being used in proper conditions or malfunctioning, or in inadequate spectrum ranges, this equipment may interfere with other services and may hinder the proper functioning of emergency communications.
And finally this week, while you're outside operating field day, you may want to look up at night. The BBC News reports that 5 major planets in our solar system will shine brightly in a row during a rare planetary conjunction from Friday. If the sky is clear, the naked eye alone will be enough to see Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn glowing before dawn. It's a special opportunity to see Mercury, which is usually obscured from view by the sun's bright light. The conjunction is best seen on Friday, but will remain visible until Monday from most parts of the world. The last time this conjunction happened was 2004, and it won't be seen again until 2040.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copies sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon. This Week in Amateur Radio is heard around the world on nets and great repeater systems like our newest affiliates, the K2IWR repeater on 147.180 MHz in Cortland, New York, and the K2MST repeater on 443.150 MHz serving all of Syracuse, New York. We welcome them aboard the vast This Week in Amateur Radio network of repeaters and nets around the world. If your net or repeater carries This Week in Amateur Radio, why not let us know about it, and we'll give you a free promo here on the air. All you need to do is put all the details into an email and give us the repeater call sign, frequency, area served, and the days and times that you carry This Week in Amateur Radio, and send it off in an email to w2xbs77@gmail.com. We'd be happy to hear from you. That address, once again, is w2xbs77@gmail.com. We hope to hear from you real soon. Many of the news and information items heard on this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, the Southgate Amateur News Service, Steve Richards, G4 Hotel Papa Echo, and the Southgate Vibes News Service, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the FCC, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia, and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the Tech Guy, Leo Laporte, the International Telecommunications Union, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.